All right. Well, good evening, everybody. It is going to be another episode of Dummies for Christ. We are one dummy down. If you haven't noticed, my name is Hammer of Heretics, and I have with me the second of our trio, Acolyte Insight. We have a couple special guests today, so I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves. So we'll start with our Pope Batman.
Batman
from Vatican City. Go ahead and give your introduction, brother.
Yeah, my name is Batman. I'm actually a Catholic revert. I've been back into the church since 2020. I've pretty much spent every day, nearly every hour, trying to absorb as much Catholic content as I could, so I could learn more about the faith. And I've been around here for a while within like the different communities. So it's also great to be here on stream. So thank you for bringing me up here.
Oh, thanks for coming, man. We're glad to have a Holy Father Batman. So thank you. And then we also have Vandad here. So Vandad, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey John, thanks for having me. So I recently came into the church last Easter Vigil officially with baptism, confirmation, First Communion. Also very immersed in my faith, and am actually heading off to seminary this fall, hopefully. So.
Oh my God!
Wow.
Yeah. So please pray for me in my discernment journey. But it's kind of where I am now.
What a blessing, man! Yeah, we'll definitely be praising some prayers for you.
Father Vandad, that'd be a story.
Oh,
for sure.
Daddy Vandad, Daddy.
Hey, it's in the name, right? It's in the name. It's in the name, Father.
Yeah. And we have a special topic too. Acolyte Insight. You want to introduce our topic and who we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about a very special saint, someone who has highly impacted the church in the medieval period. One whose very theology shapes how we understand the church, how we understand the Eucharist, and how we understand anything about scholasticism. He's a doctor of the church, and he was part of the Dominican order. We're talking about Saint Thomas Aquinas.
Oh yeah, Tommy.
Or as my priest, Father Bosco would say, Thomas Aquinas.
Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah, he's Indian.
Yeah, one thing I'll say right off the bat about Aquinas, he's actually my confirmation saint, and kind of in my spiritual discernment, he was actually the biggest theologian, the biggest person that kind of helped me conceptualize faith. So I've always gone down that Thomistic kind of thought. So he personally has done a lot for me in my life. So constantly asking for his intercession.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's really cool.
Yeah, I haven't gone that much into Thomism, I'll admit, but he was definitely the person who began essentially my journey into the faith, thanks to leftism, which you can find on Acolyte Insight's video.
There you go.
Yeah, both of them have shared their testimonies. So if you want to hear their testimonies, come onto my channel, Acolyte Insight, and you'll get to hear their convert and revert stories.
Great stories, by the way. You should check those out.
Amazing stories.
But one other thing that we know about our saintly doctor is the Summa Theologica, right? Summary of theology, the big brick of texts that has now become the backbone for Western Catholic thought. Now I know, Bandad, you would call yourself a Thomist, right? So this is more
yeah. Again, I don't definitely proclaim to be any expert, but yes, my overall theology is heavily, centered around Thomism.
Right, and so tell us a little bit about your patron, like a little bit about his writings, where he comes from, what he does. Give us some cool anecdotes too, because the one with the torch and the Lady of the Night, right?
Oh.
So I'll start off with this, and this is a story I think a lot of people know about St. Thomas, but I think one that gets overlooked is kind of his journey in joining his order, the Dominicans. So his family actually really did not want him to join. So they actually did everything they could to prevent him from doing so, including, sending a prostitute to kind of seduce him. And the story goes, he drove her away, and he also kind of had that he was given like a special grace from God to kind of practice chastity in that way. So I feel like that story is kind of not talked about nearly enough, I think, when it comes to his virtue, because we obviously talk about his theology and everything, which is obviously great, but kind of who he was as a person in his own devotional life, and how he grew in holiness, because it wasn't just purely an intellectual thing for St. Thomas Aquinas.
Right. No, it was deeply spiritual. One of my favorite stories about it was Thomas was towards the end of his life, right? He was praying before a crucifix, and I think it was one of his brother friars actually heard the corpus talking back to him, right? And I think he was like, "Yeah, Thomas, you wrote well about me. What can I do for you?" Right? This Christ. And he said in Latin, "Domine non nisi te," right? Lord, nothing but you. What can I give you? So right there, he showed that his total abandonment, like there was no ego behind his writings, no pretense about it. It was a total abandonment to the love of God. And remember, the Summa itself is just an introduction. That's what it was meant for. So it wasn't even properly finished, right? There would have been so much more if Thomas had lived to older age.
That kind of tells you a lot about St. Thomas Aquinas, though, that the Summa Theologiae was quote unquote meant for beginners. But to be fair, he kind of expected you to have a strong background in Aristotle and also in Augustinian theology. So, don't feel too bad if if you feel like it's not a beginner work.
Right. No. So you brought up a really cool point there. Aristotle, right? So yeah, Thomas baptized Aristotelian metaphysics. That is like the one cool thing that he did too. Very much a fan of that. I mean, we wouldn't have the way that we express basic things like, well, not basic. Calling them basic is okay. That's a little misleading, but something like transubstantiation that we take for granted, right? This beautiful miracle. We would not have the way to express it without Thomas using Aristotelian categories the way he did, right? That God enlightened him to do that is pretty amazing.
For sure. I think the biggest thing with that is actually the fact that when we think about faith and reason, I think a lot of people kind of in our culture think that like the two are totally divorced. I think what kind of St. Thomas Aquinas and many other theologians, but especially Aquinas, does with his writings and the way that he kind of focuses his theology is bridging that gap, saying that faith and reason go hand in hand, right? So through natural law, natural reason, we can come to understand many things. So that's kind of one thing I appreciated personally, was kind of when I was growing in faith, it's kind of going down that road.
Yeah, for me, one of the big things St. Thomas Aquinas did, surprisingly, even when I was coming back to Christianity as a whole, it was basically like his arguments that kind of made me, even though I didn't know at the time, it was his arguments, the 5 proofs for God,
Yes, I still use those when I'm, kind of debating with atheists and whatnot. Because I really think they're very bulletproof.
Yeah. So, Bandit or Batman, why don't one of you guys tell us what are the 5 proofs for God for someone who don't know?
Oh, Bandit, that's all you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I probably wouldn't be able to give like an expert kind of analysis on it, but
just a quick synopsis is all we.
So yeah, the biggest part of it, what I'll say is kind of the unmoved mover, right? Or kind of that uncreated creator that St. Thomas talks about. For me, that I feel like is very difficult for a lot of atheists to contend with. So essentially, what St. Thomas is arguing with the unmoved mover is, kind of like imagine a locomotive, right? God himself, right, is unmoved, right? But he sustains all things that are moved, right? He's kind of that locomotive who isn't moved by anything else, but is moving the entire chain. And that chain being like the universe, space-time, everything that is created, which is also us. So that's kind of my favorite one, so to speak. So his first way and his second way are tightly linked. So yeah, I would say like that's kind of my biggest takeaway with the 5 ways.
Yeah, one of my favorites is like the Archer explanation. So it's like an arrow in and itself cannot move. It's not. It's in and itself is not. It's the enactment of creation. The archer is the one who actually initiates, who's the one who puts things into motion, similar to the locomotive. The archer needs to draw back and loose the arrow in order to, expand stuff in order to get to its destination or to put it into motion to cause it to move. So we are like, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the kind of like his teleological.
His teleological argumentation. That helped me a lot to come back to realize there was a God.
Yeah. I use that as one of my staples because, when we look at the chain of causality, right? And I started getting into causality because of Berserk. Believe it or not, if you guys have seen that anime, you always talk about the law of causality, in this world. No, but so they show that like, hey, Thomas already kind of had this figured out like 7 years back. He's like, look, there cannot be an infinite regress, right? There is a spiral of causation, right? With the secondary causal agents like us interacting with our will and reason, but there has to be a primary causal agent. There has to be an uncaused causer. Right. And so that's kind of like when we look all the way back, it's like there has to be someone starting this who kicked off the dominoes to allow every single thing following after to happen. And that's my favorite argument from Aquinas. And I still use it even now, like when we talk about free will, because that's also instrumental with our intra-faith talks with like Protestants, where sometimes varying groups of Protestants will not have the Thomistic view of the will and reason as image bearers of God. So
on that specifically, actually with Protestants, it's interesting because I've heard some Protestants actually because they kind of don't have that Thomistic thought in their traditions. They believe that God exists, not that He is existence itself, right? Kind of the way St. Thomas would describe it, which kind of leads them into some errors metaphysically. So I always find that very interesting, that they kind of hold to that. But yes, I have also heard Protestants make that type of argument.
Yeah, at least from my background, it's like, at least with no Thomistic views, I'd argue, at least from my experience, like if you really like, at least how some of the Protestants I've been around, if when I was picking apart like the reason why they don't invoking the saints for intercession and all that, they view it as it takes away from the glory we should give to God, as though God is just the greatest among all these beings, when He Himself isn't like a being in how we understand it, since He literally brought being into being.
Well, exactly, and it's in that same way, like when we venerate saints and their good deeds and their holy lives, we're also, that's a reflection of God and like what He was able to create in them, right? To be able to do that. So it's also kind of another angle I approach with that kind of saint veneration.
Yeah. So, got anything you want to add, Batman?
The bit I was going to actually add too, which is also fun, is also talking about the eternity of God. Versus especially to like eternity of even like time and space, stuff like that. So even when we talk about like God creating time and space, those things didn't exist before God. God created those things, and it's something that St. Thomas Aquinas even goes into, where God is a different, I forget the exact word that he uses now, but it's essentially describing how he has a different form of eternity compared to what actually does exist within creation.
Yes, and this is where we differ from faiths like Islam and Mormonism, where they believe in an eternal creation, right? Where and where it's almost like this subservience that their conception of God is bound in time, can only interact with matter in certain contexts and with caveats, whereas the God of the Catholic Church, and as described by Thomas Aquinas, he's actus purus, right? There's no potentiality to him because he's pure act. He is, like you said, he is existence in that relative immanence, but he's also purely transcendent and separate from it, unlike it, and can at will, as the primary principal mover, exercise his will as he pleases upon creation, because he has that eternality that is unlike the created order.
So that's actually something Eastern Orthodox actually would disagree when you talk to them, is God being pure act in the way St. Thomas talks about. Because again, the way St. Thomas kind of articulates this is, God is perfection. There's no potentiality in God. There's nothing God could possibly have more of that he already doesn't have, right? So again, it would have to be, like, it would necessarily follow that God would have to be pure act. There's no potentiality.
Right, because God cannot change. Potentiality implies mutability. Because if you have potential, you can change, right? Like, that's the key. So they may not recognize, when they deny it, what the actual implications are of it. when they fight that, because the whole point is we're saying the same thing that's been said for centuries, millennia now. God cannot change, right? But hey, it gets very polemical, right? And they hear Aquinas and they're like, oh no, but he's not Palamos. So not to be rude, and I can say it because I have my woo-woo kind of feelings about not neo-Palamism but Palamism. But the other thing I really enjoy about Thomas is the way he breaks down narratives, right? The way he weaves narratives. And my favorite one, his story, is the way he looks at the fall. I know we've talked about this before, guys, but the way he talks about how the fall happened, where it's like, hey, this wasn't like an actual war in heaven the way that you think, like a martial act. This was a debate, right? Between Lucifer.
This was a Discord debate.
Right. It was a Reddit mod in a Discord admin. But no. So think about it, because the fall was pride, right? That's a given. It was an act of pride. Non servium. I will not serve. And so Lucifer was a cherubim. It was like the second highest order of in the total choir. Went up to bat against an archangel who's like the second lowest in the order of angels, and got trounced. So total humility, total humiliation, booted out of heaven in a like you said, in a fedora wearing theological debate. Which I love the way he viewed this, right? And the way he talked about these concepts to take them in a scholastic framework and then also make them approachable, right? Because I'm not a scholastic in the Thomistic sense, but when you start getting into the actual metaphysical stuff, like I have one of his books and my eyes were like glossing over, and my brains are dribbling out of my ears. Stuff like that shows that, like, hey, he can be as lofty as necessary to fully expound on something, but then as approachable for like a lay dummy like me to get it and be like, oh, I like that,
I think that's kind of what makes our Catholic tradition so beautiful, is that we embrace that sort of thing, right? And we're able to explain it using kind of that scholastic framework. Whereas I think a lot of other Christian traditions kind of shy away from that. But especially in kind of the world we live in today, I think a lot of people are looking for answers and explanations. So I'm just glad that we've embraced it.
Right.
Yeah. So I actually looked up this one interesting story in preparation. So we all know Thomas Aquinas to be this genius in the Catholic Church, and
the greatest genius,
the best, But did you know that he actually was called the dumb ox while he was in school?
He was, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
so you guys know the story, but for our audience, why was he called the dumb ox? Well, when he was in school, he's most known and most notably, he's a big guy. He's also very quiet too. He actually never really bragged a lot. He never really talked so much. You know, we're a bunch of yappers. Thomas Aquinas would be the guy in the corner listening to everything and processing it before he even spoke. But his fellow students actually call him the dumb ox because he never spoke, so they thought he was just stupid. But his teacher, who would later become a saint, I believe Saint Albert, he actually knew that Thomas Aquinas was a genius. He's like, you guys would call him dumb ox now, but he's going to change the whole world, basically.
As the kids now would say, he was silently cooking the whole time. So
he was getting ready to cook the whole world, and he was still cooking. He was cooking so much, guys like, whoa, we're not ready for that. And took him up to heaven. If you really want to, that's why the Summa's never been finished.
That was Albert. He's like, yo, dude, let him cook. Yo, brother.
Guys, like, you don't understand. This guy's. But yeah, so I think it's quite interesting. It shows a lot of like Thomas Aquinas' humility in a lot of things. You know,
I think that's to kind of go off of that, Acolyte. It's like you know, any student, kind of any sort of like person who's trying to learn anything. I think there's a lot to be said with that. Is like just having the humility to kind of sit there and listen and absorb instead of thinking you know it all or you know, trying to speak. Yeah. I think that's really says a lot because I know a lot of people, very smart people, who don't necessarily have that humility to sit there and absorb that information, that knowledge from others. So just for those students out there, definitely a lot to learn from that story.
Yeah.
It's like it just goes to show that, you know, even geniuses like Thomas Aquinas knew it was smart to learn from these experts. Right. You know, just because he was smart doesn't mean he was smart. You know. Right.
And it was more than just like head logic, because and one of my favorite things about him too is all of the Eucharistic songs, the Eucharistic devotional hymns we have. We are indebted to Thomas Aquinas, and I know there was a contest because he was a contemporary of Saint Bonaventure, who I love, alongside Aquinas, and they both were writing like, okay, let's write these hymns and for the Eucharistic adoration, right, to be used for this, and so Bonaventure had his own corpus of work. He was ready. He went over and he read what Thomas had written, like the Pange Lingua, right? All there were what's the other one? Man, the Tantum Ergo, right? Like, and then there was one more that I really liked that he did. Oh my gosh. Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh, Salutaris Hostia. There you go. So he wrote, and that's just a few of what he wrote. And when Bonaventure saw this, he looked at his own work and he just tore it up and he said, I think we got the winner. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way that you can beat this. And so that is something that was so beautiful. And you know, usually saints come in twos or threes. So seeing that Bonaventure and Thomas were like homies is pretty rad.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Saint Dominic and Saint Francis, yeah, like that.
Right.
Right. And don't forget, especially too, was Saint Catherine Siena as well.
Right.
With Saint Francis of Assisi too.
Saint Clare, Saint Anthony, my homie.
Man,
they tend to run deep, you know.
That time period brought a lot of saints, like when you really think about it.
Oh, right. But yeah, part of the Eucharistic adoration is it is not just, he even recognizes, like, hey, your senses are deficient when you approach the Eucharist, right? Sola fide sufficit. That's one of the one times I can agree with sola fide, right? Only faith alone will suffice for approaching the Eucharist, right? Your senses will not. So I think that's really powerful stuff. And he knew, and I've said this so many times, right? I brought it up during my debate with Jun, right? Like, Thomas, with all of his scholastic rigor, with all of his powerful intellect, knew very well and wrote very often about the limitations of natural reason. He did not glorify the brain, right, as we see a lot of people do.
I think this is an interesting thing to bring up. So some people may not realize, but we also get our understanding of predestination from St. Thomas Aquinas. And this is not meant to be understood as So yes. So I think so. I know that St. Thomas Aquinas touched on the idea of predestination, not to be confused with John Calvin's view of predestination, where John Calvin views predestination in a positive and a negative reprobate, where Aquinas views only the positive and doesn't really acknowledge or discuss the negative reprobate.
Reverse that. One positive reprobation is double predestination.
Oh, okay, that's my bad. Thank you for correcting me. You see, I only know just the vague amounts because I'm not much of a Thomas expert, but thank you for that correction. He never really taught double predestination. He taught a singular predestination, and this is where it gets spicy, because. Not everyone understands that, but we do believe any type of predestination. We just don't believe God predestines those to hell.
Exactly.
Yep. I mean, it's definitely different in that way. But anybody who tries to compare it to kind of what Calvin taught is just kind of speaking out of left field. So
no, we've had so for a little context for everybody, we've had this discussion many times with my buddy Jim, who is a close friend of mine who I debated just not too long ago. But part of this was me because I did say and kind of muddy the waters regarding Calvinistic theology, that a lot of it was derived from Augustinian and Thomistic ideas, but just twisted to a degree that kind of put it outside of what you would consider orthodox. Not all of it was totally off, but and one of the topics was about predestination, which again, if you look at the Calvinistic view of predestination, it's just tweaked a little bit. But they do, in the Westminster Confession, for instance, it does point to negative reprobation, but also there's tension in it, right? Batman Vandad, you guys were with me when we were going through the Westminster Confession again, and you can see there's a natural tension in that same paragraph, with 3 and 4, talking about positive reprobation versus 7, which is but we also believe in this. So they have both, right? But the danger is that when you are ascribing these actions to God, right, it kind of assaults his omnibenevolence, and it ascribes evil to him, right? So
it does, yeah.
Right, because if God wants all men to be saved, he wouldn't purposely create somebody to damn them to hell.
Well, because that would make God the cause of those who do evil, and obviously God cannot be the cause of evil.
No. No. And so that's why we've talked about and you'll hear it over and over. Omniscience, right? He knows everything, but omniscience doesn't necessarily follow into omnicausation, right? He doesn't cause everything as the primary. He's the primary cause, and he can come in and through secondary causes and through the created order, cause miracles to happen, and he can intervene, but he's not he's not moving every domino and making every domino fall, right? But hey, I'm kind of
it's essentially kind of too where especially through baptism, that's when the Holy Spirit dwells within us. So if we commit sin, then especially mortal sin, then the Holy Spirit cannot dwell within us. So especially when the Holy Spirit, essentially in this case, dips until you basically reconcile to God again, then you're gonna. I think that was a discussion too about grace. It's essentially in that way too of how are you supposed to receive grace when you've already broken essentially your contract.
Right.
That's a condition. It's conditional. So long as you do not sin, you will have grace.
Yeah, that's probably going to ruffle some feathers if we have any evangelical viewers. They always like to view salvation as a no string attached agreement, but there are strings. You have to obey God. You have to follow it. You have to remain in good standing with Him. Obviously, God isn't unforgiving that He will never give you the means to return to reestablish good relations with Him. He's ever merciful, but nothing. The holy cannot dwell within the unholy.
Right. One analogy that I really like is kind of the sun in the window. So it's kind of like, if your window's open, the sun's able to directly enter the room, right? Which is kind of what happens when we allow God in, the Holy Spirit in. But like if we close the window, is it the sun's fault that the sunlight can't get in? It's like, no, we're the cause, right? So
right.
That's just a good way to conceptualize it.
That's a good analogy, actually.
I like that. Because God is not an assaulter of wills, right? And that's what Thomas Aquinas also points out is like, hey, He's not going to turn your will into to evil or likewise turn your will to good. There's only been, and not to say that this isn't also like there's not chances for monergistic thinking, right? You hear the example of Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh only hardened his heart after he had been hardening his. He was only had his heart hardened by God after he had been hardening his heart like the majority of the time. And God did say, "Hey, I will harden Pharaoh's heart," but Pharaoh was doing the legwork, right? So it's both.
Right. It wasn't God doing it directly. It was because of God in that sort of way, where like.
Because God, indirectly through, he allows us to have kind of that free will to decide whether we want to disobey or, to harden our hearts. In that way, he can be the indirect cause of it.
Yeah, it's a very similar stance with divorce. Back then people thought that God allowed divorce. No, he only gave them that means because of their hardness of their hearts. Yeah. But in God's eyes, that was not okay. Marriage is very, very
God
strict.
Hates divorce. It says it straight up in the Bible. God hates divorce. I don't know how.
From the beginning, it was not so. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Moses only allowed you to divorce out of the hardness of your hearts. That's saying something.
That's gotta sting. Jesus just saying that outright.
Man, I will say though, I think it's a tragedy, kind of what's happened to the sacrament of matrimony and the Christian tradition overall. I think as Catholics, like we've been kind of the last ones to kind of uphold it to this level that it was always supposed to be at.
Yeah.
You mean I don't get 3 strikes, you're out? What do you mean? Like, wait.
It's a baseball game for the Orthodox.
Wait, you're telling me that the wife I divorced, my wife who I received after I remarried, after I divorced, 3 times. It's just like, and I married a different woman multiple times. I'm not. You're saying I'm sinning? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You are.
Dang, bro. And that's what this covenant is. It is a marriage too. So we're marrying ourselves to Christ. It's a wedding feast. So and I think covenant theology is like very important, and I think a lot of times that's been lost. Although we're keeping it. We're keeping it the positive faith, right? One Holy Catholic Apostolic Church.
Yeah, especially with matrimony too. When we think about marriage, it's a reflection of the type of bond, the type of love we're also called to have with God. So we're supposed to be married to God as well. God wants us to marry Him. Mm-hmm. So marriage, I think, is kind of that relationship between a man and a wife is very similar to the relationship we are meant to have with God and kind of the world to come.
But wait a sec. What about contraception?
Ooh.
Yeah, I heard that if you use contraceptions in a marriage, it's a very reliable source.
Wait, did Ben get in the chat? Did Ben Thorpe enter the
chat? Benjamin Thorpe, yeah.
Even once, it's no longer valid.
Yeah.
You hear that? Wait, guys, you hear that?
I guess, guys, contraceptives is only because nobody agrees on the filioque,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Patriarch Cyril had to wade through blood and bone in Ukraine just because The filioque is still there. That's so gnarly, guys. Like,
well,
my
guys,
What, you want to
we
debate
don't.
me on Christian etiquette, bro?
so I guess
I mean-
let's tie it back to Thomas. You know, what are some things that Thomas taught about marriage? You know, because
he said
I know
true love.
well, it's like I know it's like ultimately he said the primary end of marriage is for the good of the offspring, you know, procreation and the education of children. You know,
Well, so in one of his responses, it's funny. I was talking, I was looking at this with Chitin actually, because someone in a particular forum was talking about Catholic social teaching and was completely butchering it, like just brutally.
I think I know who butchered it. But
they posted
I
a
won't say
quote. They posted a quote from the Summa. I'm trying to find the objection right now, but like literally right under it. Oh yeah, here I got it. So don't ask me what part it is, but the objection that he quoted was, further, the cause is more powerful than its effect. Now, original sin is transmitted to children by concupiscence, without which no venereal act is possible, as Augustine declares. Therefore, no venereal act can be without sin. But on the contrary, which is like the immediate response, Augustine said, this is sufficient answer to heretics. Only they will understand that no sin is committed in that which is neither against nature, nor morals, nor a commandment. He refers to the act of sexual intercourse between the patriarchs of old and their several wives. Therefore, not every venereal act is a sin, right? So like I know that there's like this back and forth. It looks like we lost Batman.
Yeah.
There was a back and forth about whether or not certain marital acts can be sinful within the marriage, but we can see in John Paul II on the body that, yeah, I mean, absolutely, there's human dignity involved in this, right? And yes, the act itself has two purposes, right? It's both procreative and unitive.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
if you're using it as a conduit for your lust, right, without and even like that's an abuse. Now if you're objectifying your spouse and robbing her of her human dignity, that's an abuse, right, within the marriage. So there are guideposts, right? You know, your wife isn't just like
she's not a
object.
trophy.
She's not an object.
Yeah.
She's not an object.
Well, yeah, because even in marriage, and I think that's one of the interesting things as well that people don't talk a lot about is even in marriage, you're called to chastity, right? So in the
Yes.
same way,
Yes.
because again, like if you're having sex with your wife, but you're not, it's not in a loving way, right? There's no love involved. It's just like, I don't want to be crude, but a warm body to basically masturbate into. That's also committing the same type of sin as
Yes.
you know.
Continence is key.
Right.
It is key. So and again, that's what when you cleave to your wife, you become one flesh. That's part of this. And you, if you want to see what an unhealthy marriage look like, you can look at Adam and Eve, for instance. God, this
That's
woman
true.
you gave me is completely broken. Giving me
Can I get a new one?
she gave me this. Give me that dang fruit. Like what?
I sacrificed a rib for this.
But
Wait, I'm never taking my girl. I'm never letting her choose what we eat ever again. That's all I'm gonna say.
oh, yo.
I mean-
Oh.
That's why they have such a tough time choosing what to eat. Because the last time they did ruin
Oh,
all of humanity.
man.
Ooh.
The woman, Lord, she chose Applebee's this time. The woman you gave me. That's why I got that bubble gut. I got that bubble gut now.
She chose Applebee's when I wanted Chili's,
Oh, dude, I would choose Chili's over Applebee's any day of the week. But if my missus said she
Yes.
wanted those baby back ribs from
Oh,
Applebee's,
no.
I gotta do it, right? I mean, like, yes,
Those
dear.
baby back ribs.
back,
Yep.
baby, back, baby, back, baby, back.
But and that's part of it is that I know, like, yes, hey, husbands, love your wives, but we are also called to be deferential to our wives as well, right? Like not to say like give up your headship, right? God forbid, but it's a give and take. We are yoked together, like, right? If you have two oxen sharing a yoke and one just decides to pull away, one of them's going to tip over, right? So that's why Jesus even says it. Hey, take my yoke, My burden is light, right? Because a yoke, it's two. You are yoked with him. We are yoked with our spouses.
One thing that I want to speak on when it comes to marriage specifically, and kind of the Thomistic framework, the natural law framework that we've adopted as Catholics, is because I think we've adopted it, we have a much easier and better time explaining, especially to a secular audience, what marriage is ordered to do. Because we believe in what a thing is naturally ordered to be. So when we're talking about marriage, it's yes, the union in love, but you also have ordered towards procreation, right? So you'll have some people who say things like, "Oh, well, what if the woman is infertile or whatever?" It's all about what it's ordered towards. So even if tragically the woman is unable to have a child, right? The act itself, that marriage itself, is still ordered towards the same end, even if that end isn't possible.
Right, and that's that end that you talk about is telos, the teleological purpose of something, right? Like, for instance, if you want to look at the broader human telos, it's be fruitful and multiply, right, and take dominion of the earth. That for a lot of people is, hey, that is the human telos. That is what we were made for. That is our end. But we've been given a new end in the covenant as well, right? To be divinely adopted, to be heirs to the promise, right? To receive the Holy Spirit and to do these things. So Thomas, like brilliantly using Aristotelian logic and philosophy, was able to say, hey, we have a telos, right? Whereas you look at a lot of the world, and this is the beauty of it too, is like a lot of these arguments that you'll see with like atheists and like modern like libs and people like that, these have been beaten like 700 years ago by Thomas, right?
Oh yeah, and I think think about it like this: when we kind of got rid of what we were naturally ordered to do in that way, and we stopped thinking in the same way, I think that's when it opened the door to so-called gay marriage, contraception, all these things. It really kind of opened the floodgates, so to speak, is because we don't think about it in the same way.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's a dysteleological worldview, a worldview without an end, without a purpose. That is why the modernists, a lot of these modern people, are completely divorced from what they were meant to do. They don't know what to do. They don't have a framework. They don't have a structure. They've never been taught. When all of the wisdom is right here, right? It's in the church.
I would say even too, that would be Henry VIII's fault for all this.
No,
definitely didn't help.
Too soon.
Because that's even too, just like with Protestants.
No one agreed on the filioque way.
Come on, man. He was a defender of the faith.
He was defend. Well, we have a new defender of the faith, Charles. I was hoping that he would bring the English Church back to communion, but the female Archbishop of Canterbury he elected made me think that's not going to happen.
I don't think so. Did you know, fun fact to dive, during the actual coronation of the Archbishop of Canterbury, there is a process where someone can voice objections, and someone did raise an objection.
Yep.
And it got completely ignored.
Yep.
Oh no, they pulled him out.
I believe it. But like at that point, why even have the act of objecting if you're just going to pull out the objector?
Well,
no one's objected. Someone objects.
It's political. It's all political.
It's a political office. I mean, the the church is a state apparatus in the English church. I mean, that is how it is. That's how it was founded.
Yeah,
so,
I know.
Yeah.
And even too is just where I also say, especially as well as Protestants, essentially picking that up after him too, because it's them as well. They don't treat marriage really as a sacramental union either.
No, that started. Luther started with that too, because he said, "Hey, you went through all the sacraments, marriage,
exactly.
Well, part of one is baptism, the Eucharist.
That's it. Just 2 sacraments.
Because that's the only ones you can really see in the scriptures.
That's the only ones I thought about on the Thunderbox. Luther.
It's the only one I really wanted to argue about was Zwingli. So
I mean, just think about it though. Like when we're talking about kind of the Old Testament and like divine concessions. I mean, think about how difficult of a time people have with matrimony now, and like now take that into kind of the ancient Israelites and the way they saw it. So I mean. Yeah. It does make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And civil marriage is a pale imitation of the divine. And yes, like natural marriages are they can be valid, right? I mean, I have like a whole chart of like the different types of marriages, right? Like between people, but it's the one sacrament that is not given by the church. It is witnessed by the church and given from one participant to another, right?
Well, one thing I want to say to tie it back into Aquinas and natural theology, especially on this topic, is think about all the different cultures throughout human history. They've had almost an identical view when it comes to marriage. They have understood kind of that teleos that you were talking about, the reason for why marriage needs to exist, right? So they kind of, again, not even having the divine revelation, using their natural reason, they're able to come to this conclusion.
Right. That's exactly true, because and I appealed to this during my debate too, is that there is a innate desire because of relative divine immanence to adopt and mimic the divine order, right? Like it's the law written in our hearts, right? If you want to put it like that way, the nous. So within us, in our core, we are drawn to a certain extent to God. I mean, obviously we are enemies of God due to the fall and our wounded nature, but there is still a desire to mimic this divine order, including matrimony, right? It's beautiful. That is the crux of natural theology, which, again, the East would disagree with. I think some Protestants would as well, especially the Reformed would not agree.
And one thing I find interesting about that is this isn't even really necessarily just anything new with Aquinas, although Aquinas kind of took it to the next level. But you even see this in the New Testament with St. Paul. I mean, St. Paul talks about this natural reason, natural theology, and how he uses it when he speaks to the Gentiles and whatnot. So this is a tool that we're all supposed to be using, and to not use it, I think, is to shoot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah. I want to ask you guys some thought-provoking questions, if that's okay.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I guess the first one: if Thomas was alive today, what modern question do you think he would want to answer using his ideas?
Ooh, that is there's so many I could go to. Just like what we were talking about now. I mean, marriage could be a really good one.
The modernism.
I think for the sake, abortion is a great one as well. Maybe a topic that's related to Christian unity, I would say. So maybe like maybe to bring like kind of the Protestants in, kind of sacramentology would be something maybe to help bridge that gap. Or I don't know.
Imagine the beef if he was alive when Martin Luther was.
Oh, I know.
Oh yeah. I mean, imagine if him and Zwingli had a dialogue, because Zwingli was a so-called Thomist. So
yeah,
right.
What about you, Batman? What do you think he would tackle? So we got abortion, we got marriage, we got Christian unity,
transgenderism.
Oh, still my answer.
I think St. Thomas would freak out if he knew about it.
To be fair to that particular answer, though, we're talking about something he'd want to tackle.
Yeah. Okay. Well, another question. What's one thing about Thomas's life and theology that really surprised you when you first learned about him?
For me, it was the amount of devotion that he really did put into like his writings, and even just basically to laying out that groundwork and that foundation that even still today. He's basically even considered to in that way too, like a father of philosophy.
Yeah.
I would say this, not necessarily something that surprised me, but something that kind of doesn't get talked about as much. I probably would say just his general kind of devotional life. Because again, like I've stated before, a lot of people think of Aquinas, they think of he was just like some purely intellectual guy. But he really maintains kind of the mysteries we have, and he appreciates the mysteries we have in our faith as well, even though he tries to go, for definitions and things like that using natural reason. But he is very true to the mysteries of faith, and kind of that devotional aspect as well.
Yeah, they kind of tie it back to a Hammer said. You could see a lot of his reflection in the respective mysteries in the hymns itself that he wrote. You know. What about you, Hammer? What when you first learned about Thomas, what shocked you the most?
Well, when I first learned that he was like really close with like Bonaventure, because I was like, some these guys are kind of on like different sides of the street, but it's cool that they kind of met in the middle and we're like, hey, I'm cool with that, because Bonaventure's theology is a little it's scholastic in a sense, but it's not as rigid as Aquinas is. It depends. I mean, and yes, Thomas Aquinas talks a lot about love, but I very much enjoyed how they kind of looked similar, and it's like, but there's much more rigor, much more depth to Aquinas. So I just like that he developed these connections. That was something I really was surprised about too.
Yeah, for me it was. I'm going to go back to the very first thing. It's like the fact that his teleological arguments and his it are still being produced and used even by people who don't even know about Thomas Aquinas. But his arguments for the existence of God is still impacting Christianity today. It's how we help the people in the secular world, the atheists, to acknowledge that there is a God. That was my big shock. Like, this is the guy who made these arguments? Dang!
Man, just to kind of go back to that for a second, I think his fourth way, so basically his degrees of perfection argument, is one that not a lot of people talk about, but I think kind of goes into God being transcendental and the fact that there's degrees of goodness to anything, right? So some things are more good than another, or more true, or more perfect. So the logical conclusion to that would be, there must be something that is maximally good, maximally true, maximally perfect. And the cause of all perfection, or the standard, so to speak, in this thing is God, or what we call God. So I don't know. That's another interesting one as well that not a lot of people speak about, but kind of, especially when it comes to moral theology, is pretty important.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think a lot of his argumentations for the existence of God is probably never going to leave the church's history at all. Even Protestants still use it, evangelicals use it. Well,
one thing that's interesting about that is I've heard that the Protestant seminaries that have used Thomas Aquinas, many of the seminarians convert to Catholicism once they learn about Thomistic theology. So a lot of, unfortunately, Protestant seminaries kind of...
Yeah, I think those seminaries are going to be taking Thomas out real quick.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They usually rely on Augustine instead.
Yeah, I like Saint Augustine.
Augustinius.
Yep.
Yeah, but
I like Augustine, but no, I'm just saying, like, he's a little more tame than Thomas, and a little, like, they don't, like, when you read Thomas, like, I've read some of the Summa, not the whole thing, but when you read it, it's like very hard to ignore the Catholicity, right, of the ideas and how they're expressed and how the church lives them.
Yeah.
So it's
because he does such a great job at expressing it too.
He does.
Oh yeah, he does. I've only read like small bits here and there because I'm way out of my depth when I read it. It's like,
well, here's the thing. One thing, if you notice about his articles in the Summa, is he always puts out the common objections to whatever it is he's talking about, which I think is really good in the sense that he's actually applying it to what somebody would try to argue against, and then he also responds to those objections.
Well, that's how classic scholasticism worked, though.
Yeah, exactly.
That was
what college. That was what college was too. You would go and you'd get your topics together, like in the lecture hall setting, and then they would be like, okay, well, who's going to debate this? It was all through debate. That's why, like, this was, all of these are like holdovers from Thomas putting debates together.
You don't see that in the universities anymore, though.
No,
they
took
took just like they took out philosophy in general too.
And if they do, it's mainly to push a narrative now. They only select philosophers that would fit their narrative if they did.
Right.
Well,
Well, I
he's
mean,
kinda
that's what
right.
honest.
a lot of
You're
atheists
kinda-
would be like, "Hey, no, Phil bros." Like they don't want to talk about philosophy, so it's like they're just disconnected.
So there kind of came a time where like people started thinking the natural sciences were the only sciences, right?
Scientism, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like people like the Richard Dawkins or like the Stephen Hawking's of the world. They're like, oh, we don't even need philosophy. Like we can just understand everything through natural
Christopher
science.
Hitchens, perchance.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I just dealt with this in the wake of that debate I keep alluding to. Someone was trying to tell me that how can you have epistemic certitude about the church if the church is not falsifiable? And I just straight up told him, I was like, dude, you are misapplying a scientific principle, right, meant for hypotheses that are supposed to be falsifiable to a theanthropic institution. So that's an abuse of it's Karl Popper's falsifiability principle, right? So like a thesis should be falsifiable, but that doesn't provide any certitude, because usually the scientists will keep testing even if they find one false thing in a thesis.
It could just be a fluke or a flaw, a miscalculation. So they have to retest it to really make sure. It's like it's like the data doesn't fail because there's one error. It's like you have to. It's the reason they're true in belief is because they've been tried and tested countless times.
But that's why everything in those natural sciences is also called a theory. That's why it's not
a game
proven, quote unquote, right? Yeah. Mad Pat.
Yeah.
Our whole unit. Okay, I'll stop. I'll stop. I don't want to get us DMC'd or anything.
No, Riley, you're gonna get us in trouble again.
And I kind of want to touch back on the taking the philosophy out of education, because I think in a lot of ways, when you don't have a kind of a strong philosophical background, you have a very difficult time kind of making sense of the world and kind of understanding teleologically like why we exist, what we're here to do. And it's kind of like you said, like with the universities especially, they want to kind of have people not be able to critically think for themselves, but to think the way that they want you to think. So that's kind of, at some point in our history, that kind of shifted to where it happened that way.
It's indoctrination.
Yeah.
Well, I got one last question for y'all. If you could ask Thomas Aquinas one question about anything with God, happiness, faith, whatever, what would you ask him?
Ooh.
So my question would be maybe not one a lot of people would expect, but I think I would ask him just simply, how can I grow more in holiness? I think that would be my question for St. Thomas Aquinas.
That's a profound question. That's really interesting. Yeah. For me, it'd be I already lost my train of thought. While I work on that, someone else can answer.
Want to come on Matt Fradd show real quick?
Pints with you. It's called Pints with you, man.
Man. You're thinking about it. What would I ask?
How do you feel about the events of the church currently? I want to know, like, truly his opinion on the current events of the church, because it's completely it is different than what it was all that time. Not in the sense that it's lost its understanding on faith and morals, but how it operated and back then is completely different how it operates today.
Show me how to fight the commies.
I think he would hate the communists. Who knows? But I really am just curious how he would handle people like the Sedevacantists and the You know,
Ooh, that's a good one too.
like how would he handle them? You know, I'm very
I feel
curious
like-
to see.
I'll say this: questions like, because there's so many questions, like so many refutations he did all those years ago for things people bring up today, right? So like a lot of times I'll hear people make these arguments, whether it's Protestant, atheist, Orthodox, whatever, and I'll be like, "Yo, St. Thomas already answered this question." Like
He was cooking
way back
so
then.
bad. He was cooking
Yeah.
so hard that he already answered your question.
It's like, yeah, he's already refuted you, so it's like I don't need to ask him those questions because he's already laid it out. But yeah, I think that would be an interesting one, Riley. It's like what would he think about kind of some of the specifics going on in the church today?
Yeah.
That's also too. You have to think of a question he wouldn't say. I've already answered that.
Yeah, no, seriously, it's just like that's why I don't want to ask like profound theological questions because it's like 90%. There's a 90% chance he already answered that.
Man, I guess if I was going to ask him anything on theology, it would be the last parts of the Summa that he unfortunately never got to finish himself.
Oh,
So
yeah.
maybe I would ask him a little bit more about his sacramental theology, but I have no doubt that
I would like
what
to
was
understand more of
written.
his Marian theology. I'd love to know that a bit more.
Oh, I would have a good
I
one, I
think-
guess, because he back then he had an incorrect view of how gestation works and how that relates to fetal development. So, asking him on abortion specifically, now that we have this kind of scientific knowledge that we have now, just for him to say he would agree with kind of the Catholic Church's position on abortion now, because I know some people like the Nancy Pelosi's of the world try to argue, well, abortion isn't technically wrong because Aquinas back then said, and it's like not realizing Aquinas didn't have the full picture we have now.
Right.
Well, what about you, Hammer?
Um,
Are you still brewing on it?
what I ask him? I mean, I would probably just want to know, what his most profound feeling or experience was with God, and and if that story with Domini non nihil, if that actually happened, right? If that's just, I would love that. That's kind of where I would go with it.
Yeah.
I know that he would probably talk about the Eucharist, which, hey, that is our love and our
Our joy.
that's how we receive, it's how we partake of the divine nature. So, I would love to hear it. That would be my question.
You
Any
know,
closing thoughts you fellas got? 'Cause
I
we're
have
at
another
time.
question that came to mind. So there was also a thing too that he talked about where even though prostitution is evil, he said if you do get rid of it, it might actually be releasing an even greater evil. Wonder how you would feel about that now, especially in contrast to what we have to deal with online these days, which is
Oh.
bleeding into reality as well.
Ooh.
The double effect, right? Kind of.
Mhm.
Yeah. That would be interesting.
That would, yeah.
Well, it's kind of like I was gonna say it's like the devil's lettuce, right? Like did the prohibition or prohibition with like alcohol,
Mhm.
right? Does the legal prohibition of something or illegalization of something, what is the overall outcome? Because we saw in prohibition, for instance, that all everyone started doing was just bootlegging and
Start
stealing their own
Making a
stuff.
bunch of money.
Whereas, with anything with weed, right? Like, I mean, but so you can see like through like practical examples that he would be like, what the heck is weed? I'm sure he knew what it was, right?
It probably was called something else,
But yeah, so that would be interesting. I think it would be.
yeah, I think it's safe to say that there's so many things we can always ask Thomas Aquinas, but we could I think it'd be more interesting if we can apply his scholastic principles into how we understand the world today.
Right.
That's the beauty of his of Thomism, is it can be applied to anything that St. Thomas did not directly speak about as well, because that's how it works. So
Mm-hmm.
There's one thing I'd like to ask St. Thomas to do right now, though.
Pray for us,
Pray for us. Exactly.
Yeah.
St. Thomas,
What
pray
up
for
from
us.
movies?
St.
Hold up,
Thomas
Chrome
Aquinas. Pray for us. Yep.
Well,
pray for us.
Thank you guys again for taking the time for this wonderful panel discussion about our boy Tommy A. So if you haven't already, go take a look at the channel, give it a like, subscribe. Same with Acolyte Insight's channel. Bandad, you either of you guys have a channel to plug? Go ahead, plug it. If not,
I don't have anything, but maybe coming soon. We'll see.
Ooh, dude. Yeah, let's go. Give that good old rub. Sweet, man. But yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for coming, you guys, and we appreciate your time. And thank you for watching, audience, and God bless you.
God bless.